tonight as the Twins welcomed Harmon Killebrew, his family, his former teammates who took the 3 train all the way from the old side of Met Stadium here to Target Field. And as we continue on the Harmon Killebrew Memorial, we are joined by Twins legends to talk a little bit about the impact Harmon had, not just on the organization, but also on the entire region. Jim Kaat, one of the greatest pitchers in Minnesota Twins history, an original Twin. He was Harmon's teammate for 15 years, 190 wins as a Twin, the most in the organization in all. He piled up 283 career victories. Joining Kaat at the top of the rotation in the mid-1960s was Jim Mudcat Grant, won 21 games in 1965, helping lead the Twins to the Fall Classic. And Ken Hrbek, who grew up in the shadows of Harmon's old home at Met Stadium, listening to the thundering drives of Harmon. The Killer and Kent are two of the premier hitters in Twins history. And guys, all of you crossed paths with Harmon at different points in your career, and we already heard some of your stories about those times with Harmon, and all of them very special, but you all saw the kind of impact that Harmon had on baseball in general in the Twin Cities. And Jim, maybe we start with you. As you arrived in the Twin Cities with this franchise, how quickly people around here embraced Harmon as the face of the franchise?
Well, he was the star when we came to Minnesota. I mean, we were known in Washington as first in peace, first in war, last in the American League. In fact, Harmon hit a home run, the home run I saw him hit for the first time in the big leagues off Cal McClish broke a 19-game losing streak. And you know the winning pitcher in loss number 19 was Mudcat Grant with the Cleveland Indians. So we were not a very good team. Now we come to Minnesota, and Harmon begins the legend grows. So he was the player that automatically people up here identified with, like Hrbek and Paul Molitor. And then to go along with it, he was not just a great player, but everybody found out what a great person he is and was, and that's why we're here tonight, and that's why we're celebrating his life.
Kent, as you grew up nearby Met Stadium, and anybody who grew up a Twins fan was obviously aware of Harmon's his numbers that he put together on the field, but how early in your life did he impact you as a baseball player, maybe as a player, but also just when you listened to him talk about what he was doing on the field?
You know, as a kid, I don't remember Harmon as far as listening to him speak or anything. You just remember number 3 on his back. The thing that really is to me tonight is I was Mudcat Grant in my backyard. I was Jim Kaat on the mound in the backyard. I had Kitty. I could throw like Kitty. I was Harmon Killebrew with the push out the arms when I was a kid. I was Tony Oliva in the backyard. It was all these guys in the backyard, and to come and celebrate a life like Harmon had is special. It's kind of, you know, brings back the childhood. But to know Harmon, to get to know him after baseball, what a great man, fun guy. We chat a lot. He really liked the outdoors like I like the outdoors, which I found out after his playing days. Is he liked to go out and fish a little bit, so I did some fishing with him and had some great times in the boat with Harmon.
And Mudcat, isn't it amazing when you listen to everybody speak, whether it's players of Kent's generation, if it's the current players, or the guys who played with him, there's always that constant thread when every story they tell about Harmon was just that, his humble approach, his genuine interest in everybody else. That's what separated him, it seems, because you don't hear that about everybody.
It seems like it was, with him, it was something natural. It was something angelic a little bit about him. And though we know a lot about him, there's a lot of things, conversations that he had. For an example, tonight I talk about 1965, when the Civil Rights Bill was acted. We talked a lot about it, and he always thought that baseball would help people understand that you can play together, you can live together, and so forth and so on. There's a lot about him that in private that we won't know, but that's the kind of man he was.
Might be an indication of the kind of guy he was behind the scenes. Can you let us inside any of those conversations at all about the elements of that, the angles of that interested him the most?
Well, you know, he wanted to know how I felt about it because things was pretty rugged back in those days. You know, those were the days that in some places, the gym, you know, like in Baltimore, it was very difficult. In Kansas City, we couldn't stay at the Mule Bar in Kansas City. We had to live in Kansas at that time, and he wanted to know how I felt about that. And he gave me some ideas of how he felt, you know, about that. We talked about the patience of it all. We talked about not becoming like that person, you know, that was abusive and so forth and so on. So those are some of the little inside things that you could sit down and chat with him that nobody knows.
Jim, he was the captain of those early Twins teams. What kind of a leader was he inside the clubhouse?
I think what you heard, even you heard Rod Carew tonight say, Harmon was not a guy that spoke a lot, very quiet, but you know, in all of his at-bats, as I mentioned, with his take the helmet off, put the cap on, sit in the, no matter what he was doing, he never spiked a helmet, he never threw a bat, and if a young player came in and got a little over exuberant, and all Harm did, he would kind of sit on the bench and he would look, and that's all it took. Yeah. So he, you know, he was that leader, as they say, you know, the cliche, leader by example. He really didn't have to say a lot. You just looked at him. The flip side of him being so nice probably cost us all a little money, because when I would go in to negotiate with Calvin and you'd ask for a certain amount of money, Calvin would say, well, I just signed Harmon Killebrew. He didn't give me that much trouble. And Harm was so nice, and Calvin took advantage of it. You know, he knew Harm was so nice. When he got him settled, what could we do?
Took him in there first, huh?
Right, yeah.
Kent, we heard from a couple of the current Twins on interactions they had with Harmon, spring training, talking a little bit about just the philosophy of being a home run hitter. Yeah. Do you remember your first interaction with Harmon in that way?
Yeah, it wasn't you know, how to hit or swing the bat or anything. It was more like, you know, be a good person and be a, like Kadir said, great. Paul Mahler made a joke about, he didn't say anything about his autograph, and Justin Morneau talked about, hey, let's handle yourself right around these people and be a good person. And it really, I think that might make you a better baseball player, is what Harmon kind of, you know, got on to these guys. But no, Harmon never came up to me and said, you know, you got to do this, you got to do that. As far as, but I think it was more or less just be a good person, and things will come. Good things will come to you.
Boy, if a night like tonight doesn't motivate everybody to try and be just a little bit better. Jim, you used a quote toward the end of your speech tonight that seemed like it defined Harmon the man, maybe as accurately as anything else we heard here tonight.
Yeah, if the quote was, the true measure of a man is how you treat someone who can do you absolutely no good. And it's easy for people to be nice because they're looking for something in return. But, you know, Harm was the kind of guy, as I've heard Ron Gardenhire say, he treats, you know, the 25th guy on the roster the same way he does Joe Mauer. He was just, he was nice to everybody. Just another little aside of how I felt so bad when his career with the Twins ended, because at one time Harmon said to me, you know, I wish I could have been nicer like Harmon, but I wasn't. I was always battling with Calvin. He said, you know, if you'd be nicer, he'll take care of you when you're done playing. Well, it didn't happen that way. He was nice, but it took Dave St. Peter to bring him back to the Twins, which is where he should have been all the time. And I think he felt that conducting himself the way he did, that the Twins would hang on to him forever. It just wasn't the way the game was played in those days, the business end of the game.
When you guys go back to those early years with the Minnesota Twins, how much did Harmon play a role in just creating baseball fans in this new major league market at the time?
Well, because of the way he was. You know, I mean, he was a star, but he thought the fans were stars. You know, his treatment of people. Now, I can tell you that a lot of us was good with fans, but Harmon was excellent. He genuinely thought about the fans and signing autographs. And they talk about Bob Feller signing a bunch of autographs, but I think Harmon signed twice more than Bob Feller. But to bring up another point, in '64 and '65, we saw a lot of riots. We saw the riot in California. We saw the riot in Washington, D.C. And even though he didn't say a whole lot, sometimes he would come and he would sit by you on the bench. And if you wanted to say something, you could say something back in those days. And a lot of people forget those days, but they were rugged days. But it was the other guys sometimes, like Harmon, that was sort of smooth, that kind of cool you down a little bit and stuff like that. So
just the fact that he'd come and sit by you might have spoken volumes in those days.
Well, you knew that he knew what was going on.
You know, the other thing when everybody asks, well, why did everybody kind of gravitate toward Harmon, is that the home run was a lot more special then. I mean, baseball is not an easy game. It's not easy to hit, but it is a little easier to hit home runs today than it was then, you know, for a number of factors. And then the fact that the home runs he hit were so different, like he and Mickey, because they were these high, and that's where I've heard Herbie refer to him, you know, after Harmon passed away, he said, we lost Paul Bunyan. Well, you know, that's the kind of figure that Harmon was, which worked out perfect for the Midwest, for the fans up here.
When you look back, and the two of you, because of maybe how many years ago the careers were, now we know which of those players are the Hall of Famers. And as you look back at in a magical era in the game of baseball, was there anybody else that meant as much to their organization as Harmon did to the Minnesota Twins?
I can't think of anybody in those days. Naturally, in New York, Mickey meant a lot, you know, to that ball club. But then came Harmon, that he was the Twin. He was Mr. Minnesota Twin. I didn't like to pitch to him, you know. And when you could strike him out, but he could hurt you with a 3-run homer or something like that.
I think every team really, though, Anthony, has a player that kind of stands out. As you know, Kirby Puckett was probably the guy that played when I was during my era, and you got Harmon,
George Brett to the Royals.
Yeah, like Stan Musial, you know, with the St. Louis. I mean, there's always somebody. But you know, as far as a kid and growing up and watching it, you knew Harmon Killebrew. You knew that name. It wasn't a hockey player. It wasn't a football player. Harmon Killebrew was a baseball player.
And I think one of the reasons, like we talk about Mickey in New York and these other cities had some tradition. I mean, they had Babe Ruth. Minnesota area had nothing as far as big league players. So here is their first real Babe Ruth of the Midwest that they can latch onto.
And did a pretty good job of Babe Ruth.
And he was classic too in subtle ways. You know, for an example, this Torrey Hunter story. He didn't yell. He just says, "Oh, let me see your signature there. You sure that's your signature?" Very quietly, he says, "Learn to sign your signature," but in a very quiet manner.
How would Harmon Killebrew fit in a clubhouse today?
Wouldn't have the patience to deal with. A lot of us wouldn't, but I mean, you like to think you could adjust, but because he was so proper, and you kind of have to adjust. It's like raising kids. I mean, you have to adjust to the times. I don't know if he would have had the patience to
I saw a quote. There was a quote. Didn't he make a quote here just a while back about he wanted to get baseball back to the way baseball was back when he played it? He wanted to get that. I don't know what it is, what it was, but he wanted to get baseball. He said baseball was getting away from the game and the fans and all that kind of fun stuff. And
he wouldn't. Yeah, he wouldn't like the attitude today. And I think very quietly he would probably say something to a couple of individuals or something like that, but he wouldn't like the attitude today, which is much different. And if anybody, I don't know if Jim got any grandkids or anything, I can see where the players are today because I got grandkids, I got great grandkids. I don't like the attitude either, you know. But
can you see Harm coming in? You know how they have the custom handshakes now, or doing a little hip bump? I mean, you get about that high off the ground.
About his dancing prowess. Maybe.
I don't think. See, that was in his private life. I don't think he'd want to do that in the baseball
field. I think Harm would
field.
have probably spoke with his bat.
Yeah, right.
That's what he would have spoke. He would have went up to the plate and said, there, here's how to do it.
And I think that's why it was so fitting to have Jim Thome here, to break the record, to pass Harmon here, because if there's a modern-day player that would seem the most similar to Harmon Killebrew, is there anybody better than Jim Thome that fits that same mold?
No,
I don't see it. I don't see it any place.
In fact, the commissioner mentioned to me tonight when they showed Jim up there in the seats, and he said, he's a really good guy, isn't he? I said, he is the modern-day Harmon Killebrew.
Yeah,
He's a home run hitter. He walks, he walks a lot, strikes out a lot, hits a lot of home runs, and he's a nice man.
Yeah, he told me when he was sitting up in the stands, I talked to him tonight after, he said he was scared sitting way up there. He said, imagine hitting the ball that far.
Yeah. Doesn't that put into perspective just how far that home run was hit at Met Stadium? When you look at that seat and figure that that's 520 feet, I mean, we've seen some long balls hit here. Even in batting practice, you don't see balls hit like that.
But think about how high it went. I mean, we could come out of the dugout and still catch that ball when it was up in there. We could not believe it. I mean, something would hit, like that.
Let's fast forward, say, 15, 20 years. What will the legacy of Harmon Killebrew be? What will a young boy that's in his prime as a baseball fan, he's 10 or 12 years old, say 15 years from now, what will he know and remember, be told about Harmon Killebrew?
Well, he'll be told what is probably at that time what his great-grandfather will tell him, the kind of stuff that we're talking about tonight, because I even noticed that I went to Twins camp this year and spoke to the minor leaguers, and I said, you won't embarrass me. None of you even know that I played. They never heard of you. But in Harmon's case, you know that the grandfathers and great-grandfathers will say, now look, in the early days of the Minnesota Twins, here was our Babe Ruth. So that's how they'll find out about it.
And technology is there too. I mean, now you can pull up things and stuff like that. And some people, some guys, they're really interested in that, and they will see what, he's the granddaddy.
I think it's very interesting to see that the little story about Torrey Hunter, and to listen to Michael Kadire and to Justin Morneau, the guys that never saw him play a game of baseball, never probably knew who Harmon Killebrew was until they came to this organization, and really took something in from Harmon about being a good person, and probably maybe them passing it down to the next generation of baseball players. And that's what the kids are going to hear. This guy was a great guy, and let's handle yourself this way. Hopefully that could keep on going.
Hopefully that'll make an impact on baseball players for years to come. Guys, thank you very much for taking the time tonight, sharing your stories. Really an honor. Jim Kaat, Mudcat Grant, Kent Hrbek. We will continue the Harmon Killebrew Memorial from Target Field. We'll take a look at how Harmon impacted the entire upper Midwest during his playing days.